going to want to move forward as leaders and then show the way to those who are working with you. People still get mission and vision confused. Mission being what? Purpose, right? Your inner purpose, your sense of purpose. It's hard to feel passion and purpose if you don't have a sense of yourself. You either feel good or you feel bad. How many feel good right now? Good, okay. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. I want to tell you one of the things I most enjoyed about your conference, your training this morning, was all the passion and purpose that I was feeling in the room. And as it was heating up a little bit, I was thinking, yes, 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 this is the way to go, because that tells me there's incredible commitment to what you are doing. So just by a show of hands, I want to see how much of the choir I'm speaking to. How many of you feel that you are working with purpose and passion on a regular daily basis? Big part of the room, yeah. I felt that last year. I had an opportunity to do a workshop at this conference, and I really felt that in the room where I was speaking. It was on a topic of proposal writing, and I was so amazed at the involvement and the level of not just interest, but again, that sense of passion about the work that all of the people were doing, all of you are doing. So I am speaking to the choir. So as I move forward in the discussion and talk with you today, I welcome any questions along the way. Well, first of all, I want to say with passion and purpose, you're really dealing with your head and your heart, aren't you? I mean, it's the two combined. And to feel passion and purpose, you have to approach things with an open mind and open heart. Because if you don't, then you have a very narrow focus. And you lose out on all the things in front of you that are stimulating you and making you think and helping you to grow and helping you to stretch in different directions. And that's what passion and purpose does. It helps us to move in ways that we might not have even planned on moving. We move and we open up to all the opportunities. So that kind of fits in certainly with your topic, with your conference topic of navigating through uncharted waters. So as we move forward and we think through this, the culture that you're dealing with, I understand many of you are leading others, so you're dealing with organizational culture issues, and who wouldn't want to lead a group, an organization that would be feeling passion and purpose? You can't beat that. So in order to do that, you really have to lead the way. And much of my talk with you this morning is addressing how you as individuals can constantly feel passion and purpose when you are dealing with sometimes undesirable situations, difficult situations. I heard earlier as you were talking about limited resources, some of the frustrations that you're experiencing. So you're going to want to move forward as leaders and then show the way to those who are working with you and around you. How do you do that? Well, first of all, organizational culture, many of you use the word, but I want to give you a definition that I absolutely love and I think is most fitting. The definition is, it's what people do when nobody else is looking. Right? What people do in your organization when nobody's watching. It isn't the vision on the wall. It isn't the mission statement on the wall. It's not the value statement. All those things can be and hopefully are integrated into what people are doing. But so oftentimes you walk into organizations and they have those beautiful mission statements and vision statements, but you have a different feel from the people. And so bringing that together is most critical when you are creating a committed workforce. It's absolutely essential. And one of the ways that you do that, and Covey really does a wonderful job of this, I'm not going to try to talk about this in the hour segment, but I just want to reference it. Covey's work really addresses the importance of being aware of your personal mission, your personal vision, your personal values, because as the individuals who are working in your organization are clear about their vision, their mission, their values, their goals, then they have a clear understanding of how that connects and links with the work that they're doing day to day in the workplace. And when you don't have that, you lose your inner connection. It's hard to feel passion and purpose if you don't have a sense of yourself. And so helping your employees and you as leaders being very clear about what you feel your personal mission is, what you feel your personal vision is. Mission, I work with organizations all the time and people still get mission and vision confused. Mission being what? Purpose, right? Your inner purpose, your sense of purpose. When Jenny talked about being at the end of your life experience, well, Covey talks about this in the 7 Habits of Being Effective, is being aware of what you want to live or how you want to feel at the end of the road. Because when you are aware of how you want to be at the end, it guides you for your day-to-day life now, your day-to-day process of what you're doing in your life, what you're doing in your work. Passion and purpose comes from feeling in alignment with the personal and the professional. And so I know when I go into organizations and I do a culture analysis and I talk to them about some of their leadership training, one of the first things I want to know is, have you ever done any kind of training where you've allowed your leaders or talked with your leaders about tapping into their own personal goals and how this fits in with work? And what I hear from some top-level executives oftentimes is, oh my God, we don't really want to do that because what if they leave or what if they don't see the connection and we lose good people? And what I tell them is my experience with this is that you end up keeping good people through that process. And then if there are people who can't make the connection, well then I would suggest that they might be committed to the job, but the passion and the purpose isn't there. So they need to be free to recognize that and open up, and organizations need to be free and believe that they can attract others who feel that passion and purpose. Sometimes it seems really obvious, but I worked with an organization in Virginia last year, and I was working closely with the training director. And the training director was very frustrated. He kind of pulled me to the side as I was dealing with some of the culture issues, and he was responsible for setting up all the leadership training. One of the things he said to me is, I just need to get out of here. This isn't what my life is about. I want to move on. I'm angry. I'm frustrated with this, 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 and this. And he gave me a whole list. And I said to him, Tom, what do you want to do? What floats your boat? What goal do you have? And he said, I want to be an author, and I want to be a speaker. I want to go out and give a message. I have certain things I want to convey. And I said, oh my goodness, what better place to be than in a training department where you're observing speakers all the time, what works, what doesn't work, where you're learning how to communicate with people, where you're gathering and understanding more and more information about the topic you want to teach about. And he looked at me and he said, I never thought of it that way. I never thought of it that way. And so he wrote a little plan, and he came back the next day and he said, this is how I see my job fitting in with where I want to be later down the road. And I said, perfect. So now Tom, who was ready to leave his job, and the organization was going to leave somebody who was really good at what he was doing, now came back into the job with a sense of passion and purpose. And you know, all those things he was angry about, he could kind of ride with the tide. He was much more resilient, and he has stayed in touch with me. He's still at that organization. He's still planning his future to be a national speaker, international speaker, and author, and I see him doing that. He's made the connection between personal and professional, and that is what you as leaders really want to help your employees do, and that is what you want to do. Because when we lose that connection of understanding our personal goals and how it relates to professional, we lose our resilience. We get frustrated with the day-to-day things, and we kind of dry up. literally dry up. It's like our soul is dying. And you know that when you walk into somebody's office and you see their plants dying and you see piles of papers and that sense of losing control. I can attest to that because I've been there. I certainly know what that feels like. I had staff, Jackie worked with me 20 years ago. There was a period where I was in my office and my plants were dying, and I remember staff would come in and say, I feel sorry for your plants, Margaret. And they would water them for me. And it was like, oh gosh, you know. They really brought to my attention that I was losing my passion and purpose. And when you lose your passion and purpose as a leader, you don't have your connection with the people working with you. You can't, because you've lost your connection with yourself. And that is so important to be aware of, is finding that balance, staying connected with yourself. I do executive coaching with some key leaders of very large organizations and some very large government organizations. And so as you experience limitations and frustrations, they also experience that. And I was working with a man not too long ago who was heading up a marketing department of an international group. And Brian said to me, he would call me oftentimes from the cell phone for a coaching session, and I'd say, just wait till you get in your office, you know, because he'd be so passionate and sometimes upset about things. But he would call me, and I had him do a little exercise, and this goes back to connecting to yourself, grounding yourself, being centered. I'd have him put his hand on his heart, and he did this because usually, again, when he called me, he was very stressed. So he put his hand on his heart, and I'd say, you're connecting your head with your heart. Breathe deeply. Just breathe deeply. And so he would do that. And then I would say, set intentions for what you want this situation to be like. How do you want it to be? He could not do that unless he centered himself. I knew if he really had his hand on his heart and whether he had made the centering movement, because if he kept talking about what wasn't working, I could feel his shallow breath. I could feel the anxiety escalating. I could feel my own anxiety listening to him on the phone. It was contagious. And so when he centered himself, he could actually come into balance and think about how did he want that situation to be, rather than what was going wrong. We're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but when we focus on what isn't working for us, then we go to a place of fear. And fear is a joy killer. It's an absolute joy killer. And that is what I believe keeps most people from living a sense of passion and purpose, is that they go to a place of fear. We've all done that. We've all done that. What's the acronym for fear? I imagine some of you have heard what it means, FEAR. The acronym FEAR stands for false evidence appearing real. I love that. False evidence appearing real. Because when we go to a place of fear, we have now escalated, and we do not believe we have options. We believe that we have a box, one choice. Fear takes us to a place, and we know this through psychological studies, Martin Seligman's work. Dr. Seligman is the former past president of the American Psychological Association. He's done a lot of research, credible research, at the University of Pennsylvania. We know that fear gets us to the place where we feel small. I know when I feel fearful, I literally feel tiny. And when I feel courageous and open, I literally feel big. And when you feel big, not ego, I'm not talking about ego, I mean big, you can actually open up and access options around you. But when you feel tiny, you do not see those options. You cannot see those options. That is truth. So false evidence appearing real, again, is all about limiting yourself. And when you feel limitations, we shrink, we go into further limitation, and then we cannot be creative. And it's tough to feel passion and purpose. We can feel angry. We can feel frustrated. But anger and frustration usually stems from a deep burning desire, passion, and purpose. It just smothers it. It can smother it very quickly. So let's move on with a couple slides, because there's a couple critical components to feeling the passion and purpose in our lives. To feel it, we must align with well-being. Well-being. We must also understand that there are I coined 4 key steps. I wrote about it in my book, Tune Into Love, which is all about, by the way, passion in relationships. It's very similar. It's really the same. So it's 4 key steps to deliberately create our desires. These 4 steps, when we get into them, many of them are things that you've heard in many walks of life. You've read them in leadership books. You've read them in any kind of self-help book, any kind of self-empowerment book. But I've brought them together in 4 key steps to simplify them a little bit so that we can make them manageable and understand how those components tie in. We'll get into them a little bit later. I want to start with talking about well-being. Well-being, now this is a definition that I also feel is a good definition for mental health. It's when you believe that you have the ability to access options that feel good to you, that you feel are viable options. And when we feel we don't have those options, again, that is what fear does. It shrinks us so we don't see our options. When you feel you don't have the options, then you lose your place. You lose your center point, and you cannot come from a place of well-being. Again, well-being is critical to feeling passion and purpose. Part of well-being, one of the components of well-being, is coming from an optimistic perspective. Most people would say optimism and pessimism. Optimists are obviously positive, pessimists are obviously negative. But I would say to you, first of all, it's never quite so black and white. I would say all of us have a little bit of each in us. But optimists learn from their experiences. It's not that they don't experience things that feel undesirable to them. They simply learn. They say, I'm going to take this experience and I'm going to find the gift in it. Maybe they don't necessarily see the gift at the moment, but they know that there's something that they can gather from, they can learn from. And they take that learning and they move to the next step. But a pessimist, when we're in our pessimist mode, and we all have been in both modes, when we're in our pessimistic mode, we don't take the gift, we don't learn from the experience. What we do is we get into feeling badly. We see something that happened and we see it as a mistake. It's never a mistake if you learn from it. But if you don't learn from it, oh my, it becomes a mistake. That's what a mistake is, losing the opportunity to learn from that experience. It doesn't have to go there, though, because when you are in that mistake mode and you're seeing something you did or an experience that happened that shouldn't work, that's when we get into blame. We blame ourselves and we blame others. And there's no learning that comes from that. And there's really not passion and purpose that comes from that. It gets stifled in the blame. So giving that some thought and being aware of that, this organization, I just did a retreat for this large government organization, and it was one of the most challenging things I did, I have to tell you. I did the culture analysis, and the top leader who really wanted the culture analysis was the only one in the organization who was unaware how the organization, how the leaders felt toward him. Everybody else knew. He did not know. And it was a situation where they saw him as micromanaging, saw him controlling, saw him working long hours, but not delegating to them, not trusting them, whatever. When I presented his findings, I said to him, that sounds like the culture analysis I had 20 years ago in my department, in my group, because all of us, we're not always aware of how people feel toward us until we ask, until we open up. But what was so hard about that was that he was totally unaware of it, and everybody else around him knew. The gift in that, though, I have to say, was just profound, because he took the feedback that he received And in every situation in 15 years of doing culture analysis, I have always had to prompt the leader to share the information with the group so that we could move forward. As you had said earlier, Sarah, it's about communication to bring people together and to create a working culture, a positive working culture. So you have to communicate with people. Well, usually I have to prompt the leader to share the information so that then we can talk about it openly, communicate, as you said, open up, and then move things forward to a better place, move the relationships forward to a better place. In this case, this leader had probably gotten the most challenging feedback that I've ever seen. And he said to me after I presented it to him, he said, you know, I must share this with everyone. I must show them. I must let them know that I received the feedback and that I'm okay with it. When he said that to me, I thought, wow, I didn't even have to prompt you to do that. I didn't have to help move you forward. This man was coming from a place of well-being. He felt secure enough to do that. And when we walked into the retreat together and I'm presenting this information to his group, people were so much more open because he shared it with them. He came back and he said, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I get it. I'm not sure how to change, but I get it. And I'm going to do my best and do my part to shift the culture here. That was huge. That was well-being. That was an optimistic perspective. He didn't have to hide. He didn't blame them. Now, he did go through a couple moments of, what do they mean, you know? But he got past that. That is a leader. When I saw how he handled this, and I saw how he moved forward with grace and inner power, I said to myself, this man is going to do great things. He already has a huge organization under him. He's going to have more and more and more opportunities to go to bigger and better places because he released the ego. Ego gets in the way of passion and purpose. Ego is tied into fear. Has anybody read the book Power versus Force? David Hawkins' work? No. It's one of several books that he has written. Dr. Hawkins is a scientist. I think he might also be a psychologist. His work has gotten quite a bit of acknowledgement. And I would recommend this book to anybody who thinks you might be interested in because he calibrates consciousness. And it's very fascinating because when you read his work, he has come to a place of understanding in his research that all of us have the ability to impact at least 90,000 people. That's pretty big. What he explains is that our thoughts are like electrical currents. They travel. They travel. So these electrical currents can go through doors and windows, whatever. He explains and does some research on how things travel from the East Coast to the West Coast. I don't know about the rest of you, but have you ever felt like uneasy some days and then you learn there was an earthquake, you know, across the world or any of that? Have any of you had that experience of there's like that uneasiness? You know, I know that I have. And you don't know where it's coming from. It's not in your own personal world because things are flowing that day, but it's that energy. And you can't quite figure out what's going on, why you didn't sleep well, or why you feel that edginess. And then you see on the news something major, some big event happened. Well, this is what his research explains. What it shows is how thoughts travel, how fear travels. It's contagious, no different than laughter is contagious, fear is contagious, well-being is contagious. So when I read this book, it made a huge impact on me because I realized I had a personal responsibility to come from a place of well-being. Because every moment I had an opportunity to impact people in my thoughts. My thoughts are being projected outward. Not that I have to speak them for them to be projected outward, but they are projected outward. He's not the only one who's done this research. There's been research done by the United States government in the 1980s. They were looking at how thoughts travel. They were looking at it also earlier when they were looking and thinking about the Cold War and how they wanted to impact Russia, and they were giving some thought to how do our thoughts travel and how might we have greater impact in negotiations worldwide. So there were many studies done in the 1980s. Has anybody heard of those studies? Yes. Well, your government money, your tax money went for that. It was over a decade. And there was, the studies were actually very secretive. Russell Targ is one of the scientists who writes about that now. And the studies were affiliated with Stanford University and with some other well-known universities. But they really came to a conclusion in their studies and in studies at University of Penn. There's been studies at Duke University on this, that our thoughts are traveling, we do impact others, and that as we impact others, that there's a cyclical effect, that it just keeps coming back to us, coming back to us. So when you come from a place of well-being, you literally send out the energy of well-being, and through that effort, it comes back to you. Before we move on, are there any questions about that? Does it resonate with you? Yes, no? Raise your hand if it resonates at all. Yes? Big group here. Okay. So that means, let me just say before I go on, that means, getting off the subject a little bit, but when there's some fear brewing in the news, the best thing any of us can do is to say, how do we want it to be? We want peace, right? We don't want war, we want peace. So put the attention on what you desire, put the attention on what you want, and then you're sending out the message of well-being, rather than get caught up in the contagiousness, the energy of what you don't want. 4 steps to deliberately create your life. This is important information to know, important information to understand, because in these 4 steps, this is where you are learning and really lining up your thoughts, your beliefs, and your emotions to attract your desires. Some people think that bringing things into our life is just up to luck or to chance. And some people think, well, you know, we have full control. And some people think it's somewhere in between. I would say, being the optimist that I am, that when you take charge and you feel and understand the components to bringing in synchronistic events into your life, that you find that there's more and more events that you desire coming forth, coming inward. And when you feel you have no control, it's a little bit more of a pessimistic viewpoint, because you're just kind of bumping around in the world, bumping around in your job, and you lose your focus, and you can't deliberately create the passion, the purpose that we're here to talk about today. So there's 4 key steps. I'm going to spend a moment talking about them. Feel good. I'll get into the clarity about what you desire, activating intentions, and releasing the outcome. Feeling good is all about our emotions, and emotions serve 2 main purposes. The first purpose I think most people really miss, and that is it's our guidance system. Our thoughts come so quickly, so fast, that it's very challenging to monitor our thoughts. So earlier when I was talking about being an optimist or a pessimist, well, monitoring your thoughts, your pessimistic thoughts, can be challenging. So it's a little hard to shift if you're just trying to monitor thoughts. But if you monitor your emotions, well, now that's a different story. We can monitor our emotions much more easily. You either feel good or you feel bad. You don't have to call it exactly what it is. You don't have to call it fear, anxiety, or stress, or whatever. You either feel good or you feel bad. How many feel good right now? Good. Okay, good. I've got you then. You're here with me. Negative emotion, I'm going to tell you something that some people will find surprising, but I don't see negative emotion as a bad thing. It's only if you stay with the negative emotion that it becomes, you know, it's not helpful to you. When you have a child and they touch a hot stove, because the heat is there, they know to pull their hand back, right? They know to pull their hand back. If the heat wasn't there, they wouldn't know that, so the hand would burn up. That's what negative emotion does for all of us. When we feel negative emotion, it is telling you, it is telling me that our thoughts are out of alignment with what we are wanting. And so we need to shift our focus more in the direction of what we are desiring. So negative emotion serves that purpose. Oftentimes we miss that. We spiral downward with negative emotion. We stay focused on what isn't working, and then we gather more and more focus around that and shrink. Literally, our energy shrinks, and our mind shrinks, and our options shrink. Not really, the options don't really shrink, but what we see and what is available to us at that time has definitely shrunk. Positive emotion, you know when you're feeling positive emotion, you are in harmony with the direction that you want to be in. You're in harmony with your desires. You're in harmony with your intentions. So pay attention to your emotions. That's how you monitor the direction you're going in. I like to think about this, I call it the 1-minute plan to well-being. It's actually more like a 30-second plan to well-being. That whenever you're experiencing anything that's not working for you, fitting for you, you just ask yourself, what new desire does this situation bring forth in me? And that's how you become solution-oriented, right? Rather than focusing on the problems. Again, this goes back to organizational culture. Creating a culture of passion and purpose means being solution-oriented, not problem-focused. Doesn't mean you close your eyes to the problems or the challenges, but it means you shift your focus so that you open up to options. So anytime you're feeling negative emotion, I don't care if you're in a discussion with a spouse, a partner, your adolescent child, and you want to pull your hair out in that moment, if you can stop yourself and say, what new desire does this bring forth in me? I know I do that with my partner a lot. When we're in a discussion and it's getting kind of heated, I'll say to myself, where do I want to be? I just say that to myself. I don't say that out loud. Where do I want to be with this? And the answer is, I want to feel in harmony. I want to feel peace. I don't have to have agreement, just peace, calm, centered. And then somehow my energy shifts, and the dialogue shifts, and the tone of the voice shifts. It's very powerful. This one point has made a huge difference in my life. And I would suggest if you walk away with one point, that you try that as an exercise. You try it with a spouse, you try it with a coworker, you try it with wherever you're feeling negative emotion. Shift your thought to what new desire. You can also shift your thought to what new opportunity does this situation bring forth in me. So if it's a conflict with a person, a conflict with something going on, you shift to opening up to where can I go from here, rather than spiraling downward. Second step, identifying your desires. This sounds really easy, but I'll tell you what, I find that when I ask people what their desires are, that's really taking a pulse of where they are in that moment. And are they feeling optimistic or pessimistic? Can they get to a different place? Most people will tell me when I ask them that question, they'll tell me what they don't want. And they think that's listing what they do want. So just like I mentioned Brian earlier, when he calls me and he's angry and he's upset and he's frustrated with the organization, and he's frustrated with the owners of the organization. And I'll say, Brian, what do you want here? And I'll say, I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't want something else. And I'll say, okay, that's not what I asked you. What do you want? And he'll say, I just told you. And he'll tell me again, with more passion, with more anger, with more frustration. He'll give it to me again, and he'll list 2 more things, and I'll say again, okay, one more time, Brian, hear what I'm saying. What do you want? And I'll say, what do you mean, Margaret? I'll say, you just told me what you don't want. What I have found is when somebody's in that mode, they have trouble making the shift. So I'll say to the person, so what I hear you telling me is that you want to feel more in control of the decisions you make. You want to feel that your boss is available to you. You want to feel that you're heard. You want to feel respected. In fact, I think I hear you saying you want to feel appreciated. Very different energy, isn't it? Very different. That's a wish list. That is listing what your desires are rather than listing what you don't want. Again, all the psychological studies that we have on board show that the self-fulfilling prophecy really does exist. So when you're focused on what you don't want, you are sabotaging yourself. You are setting yourself up. And most of us forget that over and over and over again. Much of my work has been with therapists, and I started out my consulting business really focused on psychiatric groups, psychiatric associations, working with individual therapists and helping them with their clients and helping them helping their clients come to a place of being solution focused. And what I found with therapists who really have been taught this, that they, as much as anybody else, forget that the self-fulfilling prophecy exists. And so oftentimes I have found that therapists will really focus attention and help their clients focus attention to an indefinite period on what isn't working in their lives. And I just don't think that works. I think that it works minimally. Getting it out in the open, yes. But then, after it's out in the open, shifting to what does work, where a person wants to be. People can spend years and years and years in therapy focused on what isn't working. And organizations can spend years and years and years focused on the challenges and the problems. But it really does mean shifting to optimism in order to shift to solution-oriented focus. So making that wish list and tearing yourself away from writing all that you don't want is important. This is important in your work, this is important in your personal life, and bringing the two together is what will help you create the passion and purpose, and even teaching your employees how to do this and showing enough interest. Not that you're going to get into their personal lives, but teaching them how to live with passion and purpose can only create the culture that many of you are wanting to create. Activating your intentions. First of all, an intention. Strong desire coupled with strong belief. Now, an intention might be, I intend to have fun today. I intend to learn a lot at this conference. I intend to arrive at my meeting on time. I intend to end this session on time, or whatever it might be. It can be something small, it can be something really big. I intend to make $1 million this year, whatever it might be. A lot of people confuse intentions with affirmations. And many people have told me that they've stated affirmations over and over and over again, and they put them on their wall and they put them on their mirror, and it hasn't done any good. And they'll say, Margaret, this stuff doesn't work. This just doesn't work. I've been doing that. I still don't have my $1 million. Or I don't have my new job, or I don't have my marriage partner, or whatever it is. But I tell them, we're not talking the same thing. That's apples and oranges. What's the difference between an intention and an affirmation? Anybody want to take a stab at that? An affirmation, it is a wish, but it doesn't necessarily have any belief associated with it. All right? If there is no belief, you cannot create it. You don't have to have 100% belief, but you do have to have some belief. And the more belief you have, the more you set up your mind, your consciousness to bring things into your experience. Again, this is well-known psychological research that's been around over and over and over again. It's not something I'm just proposing to you today. An intention is the strong desire with a strong belief. That is why an intention is so powerful. So when people tell me they want to increase their income, or they want to create maybe something at work that's very different, very unusual, what I say to them is, hold that vision, hold the vision high. But now let's create the stair steps to get you there. Because the stair steps is what is going to be your foundation for your belief. If you don't have the staircase, then it can be very far out of reach. And if you don't have the belief, it's going to be a wish list that's going to be there your last day on earth. That wish is still going to be there. But what passion and purpose is about is taking those wishes and actually creating them, deliberately creating them, make them part of your life. So you have to create the belief. Now, one thing you can do, and this is pretty simple, is when you want to create something that you haven't done before, and you say to yourself, well, how am I going to believe that? Well, yes, the incremental steps is a big part of helping you believe it. What some people call goals and objectives or a strategic plan in business terms. In personal terms, it's just the stepping stones. But what you also want to do is look around you for other people who have done what you wanted to do. Look for their successes. And then again, you need to be able to convert that into saying, this person did, or that person did, or that person did it. They don't have to be people you know. I like to look at Oprah. I love looking at Oprah, and I like thinking about her background and how much she overcame in her life, how many barriers she had to move through in order to get to where she is. Huge barriers. And when I think about what she had to come through, she's a real person to me then. And when she becomes a real person, then her goals, her objectives, where she ended up in life, it becomes more believable to me that I can do the things I want to do. So look for things like that. Look for whatever in your life will help you believe that you can have what you want. Again, that requires an optimistic perspective. That's why I brought up optimism when we first started the talk. And it requires being open-minded and connecting your heart and your mind. All of that together. But it also requires one more thing. And I want you to have this, and I want to be able to just basically tell you that when you are activating your intentions, being able to create successful imagery is a really good thing. It's a very powerful thing. So when you have your imagination and you stretch beyond that, some people take a lot of pride in being realistic. I know I used to. But to create desires, you have to step out of reality. I don't mean be Pollyannish, and I don't mean forget the reality. I just mean step out of it. Literally step out of it and open your mind up to other things. The man who started FedEx, when he designed the whole FedEx plan, he was, I believe, a college freshman. He was in college, and he wrote a paper on this. He had to create a vision of something that was doable. And he got, I think, a C- or a D on the paper, and the professor wrote on the paper that it was totally unrealistic, couldn't be done. Well, if he stayed in that reality, he never would have created it. He stepped out of the reality, and through that process, and using his imagination, he was able to move to a better place and help all of us, help so many people through his ability to do that. I just want to say with activating your intentions too, the other piece to this is creating that quiet time. Many of you are very busy, hectic lives, but whether it's on a plane or whether you ride a train to work or whether you just, as you close your eyes to go to sleep at night, if you take a few minutes and center yourself before you fall asleep and you just focus on all the good things in your life, all that has happened that has worked for you, that centering, that quietness, it allows the inspiration, not necessarily in the moment does it allow the inspiration. It may come in the moment, but oftentimes the inspiration comes the next day. I know when I don't do this, that I get caught up in the busyness of life and I lose the inspiration that propels me forward, which is also the passion and the purpose. But when I take the time to quiet myself, even 2 minutes in the course of a day, I'm opening myself up for inspiration the next day. So I would suggest you try that as something for many of you when you're very busy, especially those who have children. I know that it becomes a little bit more challenging. Release the outcome is the final step. And I would propose to you that whenever your peace of mind or your happiness is on hold, waiting for anything to come into your life, now you've lost your sense of well-being. It's that old line of when you chase after the butterfly, it's just beyond your reach. But when you sit quietly, it lights upon you. Well, that's how it is when you create your desires. No matter what desire it is, we have proof of this. The best marriages, I love to interview people who are in great marriages and talk about how they've met one another. And what I always hear is so many people will say to me, when I kind of let go of it, maybe even they think they gave up, but the desire to meet the right partner in life was still there. But when they said, you know, I'm going to be happy, I'm forgetting it, I'm not going out anymore, I'm just going to do what I want to do. When they did that, the dream came to them. It showed up exactly as they had desired. But as long as they chased and chased and chased, it was beyond their reach. Because when you chase, you haven't released the outcome. You've lost your sense of well-being. It's the same thing at work. With all your desires and your goals and your objectives and whatever. Yes, staying on top of it. I'm not suggesting that you have a terrible que sera, sera attitude. Staying on top of it and doing everything you can, but doing it from a place of well-being and from an open mind and an open heart will allow solutions to come that are even better than you could have imagined. And that note is where I'm going to end. So I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your attention. And I want to thank you for your passion and purpose that you brought with you today.